Jason Jorjani and I have a number of positions in common. We both believe that prior to the end of the last ice age, there was an advanced civilization, let's call it Atlantis, which was largely based on the use of psi abilities, psychic powers, and which had an alternative kind of technology to the technology that we have today. We both believe that a crypto Atlantean elite still exists and continues to influence world affairs. We both believe in reincarnation. We both believe that the role of Iranian history has been historically downplayed. We both believe that some kind of global organization is necessary to forestall the loss of our humanity in the face of singularity level technologies. His projections about the future, in many respects, I agree with. However, Jason has stated publicly that he is not on the side of the moon Nazis. And I think this is an error on his part, not only pragmatically, but also in principle. And pragmatically speaking, if they're out there, we don't stand a chance against them, and so there's no reason to signal that you're not on their side. There is some reason to believe that they do exist, although the actual hard evidence kind of runs out in the 1970s. But you can look at Operation Paperclip and the cooperation with the Galen Org, the fact that Nazi scientists maintained their former military chains of commands and communication structures in the United States and in Soviet Russia. The fact that the European Union is structured largely along the lines laid out by the Nazis for their kind of European imperium that they had in mind. Some of the stuff that happened in South America, there are still fascists operating in that continent. But if they made it off-world and established a moon base, then in all likelihood, many of the technologies that we see today, like in big tech, would have really been implemented by them. Because if they were that in with the military-industrial complex, and knowing the kind of people who are engaged in military research, high-level, like dark project research, it's not implausible to me that there would be fascist sympathizers in those ranks. But if that's the case, then they're also in charge of big tech, and that's in line with the kind of intelligence gathering operations the Nazis conducted during World War II. So they were not only pioneers in their command structure for their military and their intelligence organizations for collecting foreign intelligence, but also utilizing their manpower and their brain power from their own population and from their subjugated populations. So they could reach out all across Europe and pull patents from all the various patent offices. They could go into universities and pick up researchers who were hitting on something that they estimated to be necessary for one of their military projects. Extremely efficient in all of that. And the way that the internet is structured and the kind of intelligence gathering that all of us are submitting ourselves to from big tech, if the Nazi International is still around, they would be the ones who are really in charge of big tech. And so you might look at what they would be doing as a kind of test where they would monitor what people are doing online and offline and see if they have maintained the values that are consistent with the spirit of the Third Reich. And if you aren't, then perhaps they would judge you as not worthy of membership. But anyway, that might be what's going on. If that's the case, don't countersignal them. Probably just don't talk about them at all, would be the smart thing to do. But in principle, the problem that I have in Jason's position is that he's a Nietzschean, and He believes in innate differences of quality between people, and he believes that such innate differences of quality merit the leadership of some people over others. So he is an authoritarian. He wants a global Indo-European imperium, not a global egalitarian democracy. And so he's fine with certain people groups lording over other people groups, but not with something from beyond the planet lording over those of us here. So in effect, he's like an Earth nationalist, but not a nation nationalist. So individual people groups can be dominated, and that's fine. But humanity as a whole should never submit, even voluntarily, to any higher spiritual or intellectual authority in the cosmos. And he does believe in the kind of vast cosmos that I also subscribe to. And he would believe that there are high-level demonic entities, high-level angelic entities, although he kind of downplays the existence of that higher spiritual end of what's out there. But if higher spiritual beings exist, if Jesus Christ was literally the incarnation of God, which I believe, he wouldn't want humanity directed by Jesus Christ, even knowing that Jesus was the Son of God, the most perfect personality of Godhead, the avatar in the Hindu sense. He would not accept the avatar. And I don't see why he shouldn't believe that the avatar is possible. So this cuts across much of his worldview, and it is the core internal contradiction, where he's a Promethean. He wants to shake off the reign of those in power and anyone who stifles human creativity, but he wants that power for himself, and he wants to be the person determining how other people live fundamentally. So that's not consistent, and I don't think it's a defensible position, ultimately, intellectually. And the reason that I think he can maintain that and not have too much cognitive dissonance about it is that he doesn't believe in objective good or objective bad. He has no basis for an objective system of morality at all, because ontologically speaking, metaphysically speaking, he places chaos first, and order is emergent out of chaos. He's a temporal atheist. He believes that reality is fundamentally this flux and change. So if that's the basis of your worldview, and there's no fundamental order undergirding all of the regularities that we perceive, then you can't make absolute statements of quality at all. And all judgments will have to be relative to some or another perspective, which is necessarily going to be involved with their disposition of will. And so you're going to have always a battle of wills determining the good. So in that Nietzschean sense, we create our own values and we struggle against each other to establish supremacy so that we can actualize our aesthetic vision. And so that's the kind of guy Jason is. He's a Nietzschean. He wants to impose his aesthetic vision on the globe. He wants to establish the hierarchies that other people live by. But if there was an entity out there, or a group of entities, that had more knowledge than Jason about the fundamental order of things, that were more perfect ethically, that weren't hypocritical, didn't have contradictions in their worldview, were benevolent, did want the best for all of us, that group, that angelic group, Jason would say, no, get off this planet. We don't want you. So, do you think that's reasonable? It doesn't seem like a reasonable position to me. We do have a lot of positions in common. You know, Atlantis, psi powers, the role of Persia in history to an extent. I don't go as far as he does, but yeah, there's a lot that we share in common. But the core problem is he is a power first, will first Nietzschean who uses moral arguments in a totally disingenuous way. Because he's forwarding his aesthetic vision and he wants you to adopt it, but he doesn't accept the idea that there is an objective hierarchy of aesthetic vision. He doesn't want the good, he only wants what he thinks is good. So let me know what you think, and I'd be more than willing to talk to Jason. But there are many people who have this same core contradiction in their worldview. People who don't believe in objective good or bad, but who do want to persuade others to share their own conception of good or bad. They're nihilists. They don't believe in objective right and wrong or objective good and evil, but they want other people to do what they want. They want to lord over other people. They wouldn't accept the authority of God. They wouldn't accept the authority of anyone higher than themselves, but they want to reign over others. And as in human hierarchies, unless you are first willing to submit to something higher than yourself, then you will never reign over others. That's not how this reality works. And if you think that you're operating on your own behalf and you never submit to the authority of anyone else and you get in a position where you seem to be in charge, then I would question what sorts of powers are really allowing for that. If you get in league with Satan, what does Satan promise? Power. What does Satan promise to Jesus? You can rule over this world. So demons promise power and freedom, but it always comes at a price. There is a true hierarchy, which is based on comprehension, knowledge, gnosis of the ultimate order of things, the logos underlying reality. That hierarchy goes through all souls, through the intellectual beings, through the henads, or the most simple substances in reality, and all the way back to the one. And that's the true hierarchy. If you accept that hierarchy, then you can be lifted up through that hierarchy, because creation is ultimately all from the one. And so ascending is always by virtue of an energy which comes from that which is higher. By exercising your own creativity, you're always moving out from the one, just necessarily, because creation, diversification, is creating something that is further removed from the first cause of all things. So having that value of creation means that you are necessarily facing out and away from God. So creation should not be a first value. Creating your own order or your own aesthetic vision or your own concept of the good should not be the point. It should be accepting the good as it is, knowing the good as it is. And I would give a brief argument for that too, where in principle, if you want to be satisfied, there's a very general structure of how that works. You have a desire, and then you have a fulfillment condition of that desire, right? If you can control the fulfillment condition, then you can satisfy your desires. But when you satisfy desires, new desires always pop up. And it's the way that human minds are conditioned. When we ingrain one pattern, one behavior, then we're used to that behavior and we tend towards that behavior in the future. We're creatures of habit, right? So you reinforce that desire satisfaction cycle and you're guaranteed not to have a permanent, everlasting satisfaction. You're always going to have new desires. And there's only so much that you can gain on this earth. I mean, you can have a harem of women and all the gold in the world and complete political domination. But once you have all that, that habit of wanting more is still going to be there. And that's what these elite types end up doing. They have everything they could possibly want, but now, I'm not happy with having sex with 18-year-olds and up. I want to have sex with a 16-year-old. Or I want to torture a child and drink their blood to fuel my everlasting youth. Like, that's what happened. That's the logical conclusion of always seeking that object of desire. You don't satisfy desire by getting what you think you want. The way to do it, the way to be satisfied, is to change not the fulfillment condition of your desire, but your desire in the first place. And the way to actually change that is to rest within yourself and know thyself on your own terms, and know the nature of your own will, and in perceiving it, place it necessarily in line with the ordering forms of your own cognition, right? The way that we perceive the world is structured by the logos necessarily. Otherwise, perception wouldn't work, right? It works because it reflects that underlying logos. And the will, if we perceive it, then we necessarily bring order to it. Knowing thyself allows control over those impulses and desires. And if you could be happy doing nothing, then why should you continue on this everlasting quest after more and more satisfaction? Why should you always want new and better and more expensive stuff, more taboo stuff? Why should you keep on going that way? There's no rest there. If you think that that is better because it seems better to you, it feels like that's something you want, then you're referring to the state of desire that you have now. But what if you just changed that desire condition? Rather than seeking out something that's harder and harder and harder to get, what if you changed what you wanted in the first place? What if you desired what you could have and ordered your habits not in accordance with your will, but in accordance with reason, and fit into your proper role in things? And what if that process then of recalling your creative desire to expand out into the kenoma, to expand out into the chaos of the descending order, what if the gradual process of returning meant you obeyed your proper dharma, meant you became a good householder, meant you whatever it turned out to be. But in that whole process, you're always accepting the authority of a guru, a teacher, a higher spiritual agency, something higher than yourself, because your own decision about what's right doesn't determine what's right. That order is already set. The logos is already set. You don't create it. If you're creating, you're moving away from it. You're moving away from the one. If you accept that authority, then you can be drawn back, and you can stop identifying with those separated and disintegrated elements in your own will, which create that tension, which lead you to desire the objects of the senses. So that's the kind of authoritarianism that I believe in. There is a real hierarchy of forms, a real hierarchy of spiritual entities, of beings. And if someone is higher than yourself, you should allow them to help you up. Whether they're another person on this earth, whether they're an angel in heaven, or whether they're Jesus Christ himself. But Jason wants to establish hierarchies here on his terms, but never look up. And he's concerned about people being influenced by demons. I think physiognomy tells you something, and if you're looking for someone who is talking about summoning egregores, summoning ancient gods to influence human affairs, like he's trying to collectively engage in a summoning ritual to summon the spirit of Prometheus, which he equates with Lucifer. So it's just obviously ridiculous if you really think about it. But yeah, I'd be happy to talk to him. Let me know what you think about Jason. And does anyone want to defend this position? I notice whenever I call people out on this, and it's always the same fundamental problem: Nietzscheanism, left-hand path, chaos first, nihilism. Like, it's always the same. These people have the similar stamp of their father. So, but does anyone want to defend this? When I call it out, they just go quiet. They just run away, and they don't want to talk anymore. And of course not, because it flees from the good. It flees from the light. Not that I am that, but I try to speak from it, and I try to speak true to it. That's my point in making videos and engaging in this kind of thought space. And if you're not willing to defend your ideas, then you're even a bad Nietzschean. Because if it's a battle of wills that we have to have on your terms, well, then I'll bring the divine will to the table, and you can bring your own will, and we'll see which one comes out on top. Thank you for listening.